Hello everyone, welcome to Lab 2. In this video we are going to learn about database table, table structures, and we are going to create tables in our database. So this is the Lab 2, manipulating database table structure using SQL. So this is the ERD that we are going to work on it throughout the 8 labs. So as you can see, we have 4 tables: table enrollment, table course, students, and lecturer. So we are going to have 4 tables, and as you can see, each table have a relationship to each other. The students, they have a relationship which is a one-to-many relationship. It has a one-to-many relationship with the table enrollment. Lecturer has also a relationship with the course, one-to-many, and course has one-to-many relationship to enrollment. Each table has their own primary key, which is unique. Primary key uniquely identifies a record in a table. For example, the enrollment ID. Once you have an enrollment ID, it is unique to one record. For example, the student's ID. We have a student ID 1 to 3, and then each student ID is assigned to a specific student. Same goes to the lecturer. They have every lecturer has a specific ID, and as you can see, every course has a course ID. And then we have a foreign key. Foreign key is a field in one table that is a primary key in another table. As you can see here, we have a lecturer which is a foreign key in here, and then in a table lecturer is a primary key which is a lecturer ID. So this primary key and foreign key, so as we can say like this is a parent and this is a child. So the foreign key is a field that is a primary key in another table. Now let's go and create these 4 tables in our database. So we need to, as usual, we need to open our XAMPP server. So currently my Apache and MySQL is up and running. So you can go ahead and open your shell, mysql-u root-p, and then show databases. I'm going to use TMF2034 DB. This is the database that we are going to use. And then when you say show tables, currently we have no tables. It's a good practice if we can store or save our SQL queries in a file. So for example, when we want to create table, we say create table students, and then we write our data types and column names here. We say, for example, column, and this is our column and data type, for example, and then it will create the table. So instead what we do, we just create, I already created a file. It's a SQL file, which is the name is TMF2034 _lab.sql. So I will store all the queries that we have in this file. You can have text file, but it's better if you have SQL file, because the Notepad++, it will tell you which one with the coloring. For example, now you can see here, create table. So these are you can differentiate, it will show you the errors and so on. So right now we can create table, and then we call it students. So this is our table student. If you want to know more about the query, you can go to the create table in SQL create table statement in W3 school. You can see here create table. This is the query, and then the table name is your table name, and then how many columns you have and their own data types. And here you can see, here we have person ID, last name, first name, and address. The SQL data types, you can find the data types in the SQL data types in this section. We have different data types in SQL. We have a string data type, which are all the string data types. We have a character, we have a varchar, and then you can define the size in every data types. We have binary, we have tiny text, and so on. We also have numeric data types or numeric, which is you have a bit, tiny integer, integer, float. You can see that double and decimal, and all of them, they have the size. When you define it, create it, you need to define the size. We also have date and time data types. The difference is this one, when you define the date, it will give you the format of year, month and date, which is like something like this. But when you have date time, it will give you the year, month, and also the minutes, hours, minutes and seconds. When you have a timestamp, it only gives you the timestamp UTC and then the time and the year. So you can pick any the time, date and time, or the data types that you want to use based on your ERD. For us, we have a student ID, student name, email and intake year. Let's go ahead and create our table student. So table student, we have a student ID, which is our primary key. I'm just gonna give it integer, and the size I'll just give it 5, not null. And why I say not null, when you write not null in here, it means you are telling to the SQL that I do not want to accept any null value in our table, in table students, in the table, in the column student ID. It will not accept any null value. And then their student ID, it's a primary key. There are two ways to define a primary key. You can directly define your primary key here, or you just say primary key and then the name of the column. So both these two will work, either this one or the same. You just define the optional variables here. Then after that, we have a student name. We have I will use the varchar, and then here 200 and then not null. Then we can have student email. So in our email, we also have a varchar 200 and not null. Then we have intake year, which is, let's give it integer 11 and then not null, because the year is an integer, it's an integer. So when you have this one, we just can easily copy it, and then we go to our query and then we paste it here. You can see here the query affected, and then this is a speed for 0.4 second. So when you say show tables, you can see here we have a table students. So we have currently one table students, and then when you say describe students, or you just say this, the short form students. So it will tell you what is it will describe the table students. So these are the same thing that we had in our table. We have a student's ID. This is our ID, it's a primary key. You can see here is a primary key, which is the integer 5. We have a student name. The name of the students is accept the varchar, a student email, integer, and it is the intake here, which is integer 11. Now we already create table students. Let's go back and then create table lecturer. So in table lecturer, we have lecturer ID and lecturer name. So the same thing, we go to our SQL file, we just say create table lecturer, and then here you can have a semicolon. Then we have a lecturer ID. I just give it the ID integer 5 and not null. Let's add this primary key in a different way, not like this, in the second way. We have also lecturer name, which is, I say varchar 200 and then not null. Then here we can say primary key. Our primary key is lecturer ID, lect ID. So this is our primary key, and then we just copy paste this in our query, and then when you run it, now when you say show tables, we have two tables, table lecturer and table students. You can have as the lecturers or the students. Now when you say describe lecturer, you can have lecturer ID integer 5, which is a primary key, the lecturer name, which is a varchar 200, and it is not null. Both of them will not accept any null values. Then the next table we are going to have course and the enrollment, the next two tables. These two tables, why we created this table students and lecturer? Because here we have a primary key lecturer ID, which we are going to be needed, which is needed in table course, which is a foreign key in here. So let's go ahead and create the course firstly, and then if you want to know what is the foreign key as I mentioned before, it's a field that refers to the primary key to another table. In our example table lecturer, it's a foreign key in lecturer column, which is here is a lecturer ID. It's a primary key in this table. This one you can give it a same name, lecturer ID, so you can easily define it. Here student ID. Let's go back to we have a course ID, course name, and lecturer. Okay, we go ahead and then we say create table course. We do have course ID, which is integer 5. It is not null, and then primary key, it's a primary key, and we have course name, it is varchar, that's 200 and not null. Then we also have lecturer, let's give it as a lecturer ID, the same name, because we are referring to this table, to this column. So I want to give it exact name, same name, which is an integer 5 and not null. It is I cannot see not null. There is, as I mentioned, here you can define the primary key like this. So I already defined it in here, so let's go ahead and then define it like that. And then we can also define our foreign key. Our foreign key is lect ID, and then you need to add a reference to this. What is the reference? You can see foreign key person's ID. We have references person ID. What this reference will do, for example, in our table course we have a lecturer foreign key. Our reference is the table lecturer ID. So you need to link them together via the references. So you can just copy this one, references, and then what was the table lecturer, and then what was the column, lecturer ID. So when you run this query, let's go ahead and then run it. So we got affected, the rows affected, the table is created. Now when you say show tables, we have 3 tables, course, lecturer, students. We say describe course. You can see here we have a foreign key, lecturer ID. Okay, because here I need to put the course ID, I need to put the this one, the course ID should be the primary key. This is the primary key, and the foreign key, it should be this one. So it is the copy paste problem. So the course ID is actually a primary key, so that's why we got this problem. You can drop the table. So here even it is showing in our examples. If you want to delete a table, you can just say drop table name. So we can drop table course again, table course, 3 seconds. Then we say show tables. So we have 2 tables right now, 2 tables. Now we just copy paste again our table course. Now when you run it, and then when we say describe course, now this is working well, because now we have a course ID. Our course ID, this one is a primary key. Our course ID, it's a primary key. You need to define this primary key. Lecturer ID, which is the mutual mule, which is a foreign key in the table lecturer. So we go back to describe lecturer. You can see here lecturer ID is a primary key in table lecturer, but act as a foreign key in table course. So currently we have 3 tables. Let's go ahead and create the last table, which is table enrollment. In table enrollment, we have 2 foreign keys, which is a student ID and course ID. Here we have course ID. That's why I created the students lecturer, this one in the manner, because the order, because we need to have a reference in this table. So let's go ahead, create our table enrollment. Say create table enrollment. So what are the columns we have? We have enrollment ID, enrollment ID. I just give it integer 5, not null, and then later on we can add a primary key. Then we have, what do we have here? Student ID, integer 5, also it is not null. Then we have a course ID, integer 5, so not null. So currently we have 3 columns: enrollment ID, students ID, and course ID. Now we need to add our foreign keys, which are students ID and course ID. Can say student ID, you can say foreign key is our student ID. This is the foreign key, and then you need to add a reference. Sorry, I forgot the parentheses. So you need to add the references. What is our table? Table student. So we just say table student. What column? Student ID. So this is our foreign key, and the next we have a course ID. We need to have a foreign key again. You can just copy paste, but I just like, let's type it so you can. Course ID, and then we have our reference, the course ID, which is in table course, and then the course ID. This is we have 2 foreign keys, and here we need to define also our primary key. So let's go ahead and define our primary key, which is enrollment ID. So you have to make sure they are the exact column name. So we create the table enrollment. We have an enrollment ID, which is integer 5 and not null. We have a student ID. We have course ID. Our primary key is enrollment ID. Our foreign key is student ID and course ID. And their references or their parents are the table students, student ID. Let's go ahead and run the query. Okay, it didn't copy well. I'll copy it. Okay, this one was like, it's a problem. I just copied something random. Now create table enrollment. Press enter. Query OK. Rows affected in 0.2 seconds. Show tables. We have 4 tables: course, enrollment, lecturer, and students. Now when you say describe enrollment, so it will tell us, okay, we have an enrollment ID, which is our primary key. We have a student ID, which is our foreign key, a course ID, which is our foreign key. So currently we have created the enrollment, and then we have, let's say, check our course. We can say describe course, the same thing, and describe lecturer. Okay, I have problem here, you need to put semicolon, the same thing, and then describe students. So we have created the all 4 tables with the specific columns. Currently we have no data in every table, but in the next video we are going to learn how can we insert records in the tables. So the tables are created, and then the primary key, foreign key are also added. So we are good to go to the next one. Now what is the, let's say, what do we have here? It says like creating the tables, so we already followed. Here altering a table, so let's say if you want to alter, so you want to add a new column. So if you want to add a new column to your table, what you want to do, let's say for example now we have described students, so we want to add a new column to this table. So what we can do, you can say, okay, I want to add the faculty to these students. So how you can do it, you say alter table, table name. If you want to learn more here, you can check here the alter. Let me find the alter. Alter, you can see here SQL alter table. If you want to learn more about this, you can go ahead and then learn. You can see here the good thing about W3 School here, they have a big database, and then you can the database that they are using, it has already the records. You can see here they have different customers, categories, and so on, so you can easily adjust it and check your queries. But anyways, we just want to know, you can see alter table customers, and then add your column name and then the data types. Same thing here, alter table, what table, and then add the column. So we want to alter the table. Which table you want to alter? We want to alter, let's say, table students. So let's say alter table students. You have to make sure use the same thing, and then we have add the column. We want to say faculty. What is the data type? Let's say varchar 200 and then not null. So when you put this one, execute, enter this query, right now you can see here we have only 4 columns, but when you run this query, you can see here there is no warning, no duplicates, and it is 0.2 seconds. When you say describe the students, column faculty is added to our table students. Then the next topic is like you want to drop or remove a column, so you can go ahead and use the same thing, alter table, table name, drop column, column name. So we are going to use the same thing. Let's say I use this one, alter table students, and then drop column faculty. So when you run this query, what will happen right now, it is work affected, and then when you say describe students, the faculty has been removed from our table students. So the alter is used to, for example, you want to alter your table, so you can use the alter. So it will help you to alter. You want to add the column, edit the column, and then you drop the column. The next one, we have a changing data types. For example, now you have a varchar, you have a removing primary key in a table, adding a primary key. So we already adding alter table constraint. Okay, this is the foreign key. So what we are going to do, first thing we change the data types. For example, for let's say let's go ahead, we create again a table, a column faculty. Let's add the same thing, we add the faculty to our table. So when you say describe the students, now we have faculty in our example, in our table. Now the data types is the varchar. We want to use the alter to change the data type. Let's say we want to put it as integer or float or anything else. So what we can do, you can use alter table, but then instead of add or drop, you should use modify column, and then with the column name and data types. Let's go ahead to our query, and then I will just alter table students, then instead of add we just say modify, then what modify our column, and then what is the name of the column? It is faculty. We just want to change the data types. We want to change it to integer, let's say 6 or 7, let's say 6, and that's it. We accept null here. Now when you run this query, it must now it is working 0.6 seconds. When I say describe students, look at the difference here is we have a faculty, and then we have faculty here. This is the varchar 200, and now we have integer 6, and then null, it is no, will not accept null value, but here we accept null value because we didn't put null here. So this is telling you how you modify the column. This one is like removing a primary key. Like if you want to remove the primary key, you can use the same thing, alter table, specific the name, and then drop the primary key, again adding a primary key to the table, which is not necessary. And this is like you are adding the foreign key to your table, the foreign key constraint. But so this is not necessary to do. Let's go back to our samples. Then we have delete a table from a database. So we already, like we already used the drop table. Let's go ahead and then, for example, now we create a dummy table, and then we drop this. For example, we say create table, let's say we call it dummy, and then we just add something like id integer 5 and primary key. It has just for the test. If you want to drop, when you say show tables, you can see here we have a dummy in here. Then when we say describe dummy, we do have our column ID, but we do not want to have a dummy. What we say, drop table dummy. What will happen? The table dummy will be dropped and deleted. Then we say show tables, the dummy has been deleted. So what is the objective? The objective is for us to create these 4 tables, add the primary key and foreign key, and then how do we use alter in our tables. The next one is like we need to have a truncate. What is the truncate is using? If you want to delete records from your tables, currently our tables are empty. When you say select all from students, you can see here we have no records, it's empty, which we'll learn this in the next week. So the truncate is used if you want, like for example, to delete a record from your table, you can use truncate. But be aware that when you use truncate, it will completely delete everything in your table. For example, let's say table students, it will delete all the records. As you can see, this action will remove table your database until you are absolutely sure. Instead, you can use delete if you want to delete. We are going to learn about this on the next videos, how to delete. And for example, the truncate is used if you want to completely remove or delete all your records in your table. So what was the objective in this video? Objective is we create the tables, the 4 tables we have: students, lecturer, course, enrollment, add their primary key, student ID, lecturer ID, course ID, enrollment, and then they have connected to each other, they have relationship to each other via their primary key and foreign key. In the next video we are going to learn about the inserting and retrieving data records to our tables. So we have 4 tables, we are going to insert records to our tables. That's all for this video. I'll see you in the next video, and thank you for your time.